But this babysitter who was 6 years older than I, at the age of 6, she molested me. That started the whole ball rolling for me to step into sex clubs and go into prostitution, go into massage parlors, go into strip clubs. When you use mood-altering substances or mood-altering experiences to cope with pain, then if for a season it works, and then it no longer works because it becomes norm, and so I need to upgrade it, and so that means more graphic, more disgusting, or boundaries that I said I would never cross to get the same high that I once had. So this escalated. So I began to have fantasies of rape, and it's hard for me to even state that now as a man who's been 39 years in recovery. The way I saw myself inside, the damage inside, is I could never have that woman because of, look at me, look at, I'm too broken. So if I can't have that and I want that, I'll take that. When fantasy no longer satisfies, I start thinking about what is real. What would it be like to do that? And so one night in the back of a club, this woman walked by. Man, something inside just snapped. It said, this is your opportunity to fulfill that fantasy.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I am here with Gene McConnell, and he is a former sex buyer, and we've got a really interesting story for you and an interesting show, so please check it out. So we just had a little bit of a chat there before the show, and you were kind of telling me, just about the group that you work with, and you're a little bit about your story. But do you mind if we kind of go back to like the very beginning and start just basically like where you were born,
Sure.
Childhood, a little bit about that, where you went to high school, siblings?
Well, I was born in Ventura, California, and spent my time there in that Southern California until I was in 5th grade. And so I grew up in a very good environment. My parents were pastors. My grandparents were pastors, and I could go on. The entire family had some kind of leadership in church environment. And I enjoyed my 5th grade, all the way to 5th grade. But California, my parents wanted us to move to Oregon and kind of get a different experience than just California and the big city, so to speak. But in my first several years, I had a blast as a kid. But this babysitter who was 6 years older than I, at the age of 6, she molested me, and she was our neighbor, and she molested me more than once. And I was just looking for attention, affirmation. She was somebody that I played with and hung out with, and she was 6 years older than I was. And man, that experience was profound because my childhood just literally got blew up. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to communicate it. I had huge mixed emotions. And ambivalence would be the word for that, but just the idea that one side of me really, I wanted to be valued and wanted and special, and the other side of me felt dirty, soiled, damaged, shame, and so I didn't know how to talk about it, and that happened more than once. It happened over a series of 2, 3, 4 years. I'm not sure. Many of the experiences were blurred together. But one thing for sure is that the babysitter said if I told anybody that she would tell everybody it was my fault, and that I'm the one that initiated it. And the feeling of that feeling of being dirty and soiled and damaged was huge in me. And I didn't know how to make sense of it, and so I committed to never talk about it. I committed to just move on and never ever let anybody see that part of me. The one thing that really convinced me to just stay silent is that my body responded. My body responded to the touch. My body responded to the sexual interaction. At the same time, my body is responding to it. I'm also not. I'm finding it disgusting, and I was feeling ugly and dirty and broken, and so I didn't know how to make sense of any of that. And because my body responded to it, it reinforced the fact that I thought that part of me was too broken to be known. That part of me is too dirty, too soiled. I can't tell anybody. So I committed to keep my mouth shut. Never talked about it. And so the way I coped with it was I just become a performer. So I just did extra work to make sure that people liked me, that I did really good in school. I was great in athletics and sports.
I'm sorry, how long did this go on? I mean, this was a one-time thing, or was this?
No, she did this. I would say I have blurred memories of a lot of different encounters. I don't have the ability to pull a timeline in to every time it happened, but I can say for sure that it happened, 3 or 4 times a year at least. And with these three, there was 3 years or 4 years that we were there. So after we left, we moved, then it stopped, obviously. So, but I would say, 10, 12, maybe times.
Okay.
Yeah. And the thing is that there's a really big deal in that. I mean, the idea that I know that it's wrong. I knew that it was unhealthy. There's no question about that. I grew up in an environment that, educated and talked about and understood that the adults or older, you don't have sexual encounters. That's for later in life, and you can choose and you're growing up. I knew that. But the hard part is that there was also a side of me that enjoyed it in a sense, not because anybody would enjoy abuse, but because the attention that was being given. She was saying how special I was and that she really liked me and that it really felt like she was being affectionate. So I was confused as to what is affection here. And so I didn't know what
was going on in her house.
Yeah, well, you never know.
You obviously had some issues.
Obviously, kids don't pass that on unless they've been tasted themselves. So I'm sure that was going on in her world. I don't even know where she is these days, so I've never talked to her, nor do I know her story. But the thing is that for sure she was confused herself. And she was somebody I looked up to, because when I'm 6, you think about a 12-year-old or 13-year-old, she's like adult, she's grown up in my mind, so,
right.
So it certainly was, confusing. So I went on and there was this season in my life where I was involved in sports and I was excelling in Little League, and things were going incredibly well. And this older boy who my parents, his family was going through a really hard time, and his parents were going through a divorce, and he started getting into the alcohol and drugs and some other things. And he just, my parents decided to help him. And so they brought him into our home. And the day they brought him into our home, he began to molest me as well. And he was 6 to 7 years older than I was. And he was in my bedroom. Because we didn't have a house where he could have a different room. So he slept in my bed. And that happened for as long as he was there. And there was, it was in and out for about 3 to 4 years as well. And again, confusion is because this guy was somebody that I knew that would, beat up my bullies. We'd go skateboarding together. We'd ride bikes together. We did a lot of things together. He was like a mentor. And, now he's introducing sex into the relationship. And again, the confusion was there. The confusion of, what is this? I got this neon sign I went for it. It's like, I didn't ask for this. I didn't engage in that on purpose. I didn't even initiate it. But it seems that somehow people see that and they take advantage of that. And so that happened for a long period of time. And I was very confused because outside, goofing around when we were in school or we were hanging out, we were best buds and everything was just great. But it was when it just changed when we were in this bedroom. And
I was going to say, it's funny that there was and I'm sure I'm going to botch the study, but there was actually a study that showed that women, or I'm assuming it was women that had been raped, were something like 50% more likely to be raped again in their lifetime than women that hadn't. And there was another study that I remember. They had people that were robbers, like criminals that were robbers, look at people walking down the street, and they picked out with something like 85% accuracy which people were vulnerable to be robbed. And those people that they were picking out, like 85% of the time, had been robbed. Like these were people that had been victims. They just, predators can sense a victim.
Yeah, and I think that's very accurate, because what happens to us when we've been victimized like that is your sense of confidence is broken. Your sense of confidence in making that healthy choice.
Well, intuition is a huge thing. Huge thing. People ignore it all the time.
Yeah. And so this happened. Not only did this boy that molest me for a period of time, I went to a camp for a summer, a couple weeks there, when I was 12. And the guy that was one of the guys that was kind of heading the camp, or not heading the camp, but part of the leadership side of it. And he molested me. He was 19. He molested me as well the last night of camp. And so it's like, all I did was I carried his baseball bat. I carried his gear. I did everything around, served, and it was kind. And I was looking for a mentor. I was looking for, healthy relationship, not for anything else. And I never in any way asked for that. But the last night at camp, he snuck into my bed in the middle of there was 12 other people in that cabin. But it was like 2 a.m. and whatever. And so how do I respond to that? There's somebody I respect. There's somebody who I've looked up to. And all of a sudden now here we are again. And so a lot of confusion. By the age of 12, I've had this huge exposure to sex as being violating, sex that's using, sex that is not in any way, shape, loving and caring and mutual. And so I had a lot of damage done very early in my life of what does even healthy look like sexually, and a lot of pain. And absolutely, one of the most important things in this was that I never, ever, ever told anyone. No one. I committed that, man, I can't talk about this. There's just no, how will they perceive me? I mean, if I don't like what I'm seeing in me, if I don't like, when I revisit those memories, and they did come from here or there, if I don't like that, how in the heck will anybody else? So, heck no, I'm not letting anybody in. So I just recommitted to double down. I'm just going to work hard to outdo this crap. And I'll make better choices, quote unquote. But when I was at my uncle's house, actually, I think he's more a cousin, but anyhow, I was at his house, and he was somebody who I looked up to. Who he was probably in his 40s, and had a family and all that. Well, I was over at his house playing Army, and been over at his house many, many times, but in the shed in the backyard was usually locked up. And but this time it wasn't. And so I was sneaking and hiding, as we were trying to shoot each other with BB guns. Anyhow, so I was in this shed, and when I came into the shed, there was 200 to 300 pornography magazines. And so I'd never seen one before. I was born in 55. So back in those days, that pornography was unavailable in any way, shape, or form except for behind the counter. So you would have to go to a grocery store, and you'd have to go to a special spot or a special section for you to even grab porn. Or you find somebody who has it at home, what we call the spillover effect, and people would see it there, or somebody had thrown it in the trash. So for my first exposure to pornography was at in this man's house, where I was in the shed and I looked at, I don't know, for hours. I brought the boy in that was playing Army with, and we sat and looked at it and talked about it and laughed about it. And that happened over and over and over again. I mean, so I'd go over to his house and I'd speak more. And so I became immediately connected to the pornography. And it was the same feeling. This is really key to me. It was the same feeling as a sexual abuse. Though it was exciting, it was arousing, it was those beautiful bodies. But at the same time, the way they treated women, the way they handled women, the language that was put around them, bitches, whores, sluts, and all those other languages, things I don't even use these days, ever. And so there was demeaning words brought, which I was taught differently to talk about women. So there was shame and pleasure connected. And that was the same experience that I had when I was sexually abused. And there are a lot of studies out there right now stating that early exposure to pornography has the same impact as sexual abuse, because it wounds the ability to see sex in a healthy light. It wounds the ability to understand what it means to treat a woman, how to treat a man, what is sexuality, even what is healthy sexuality. And so for a child to be exposed at an early age, especially at 12 years old, when my mind is being shaped and molded, and my learning, I'm at a very key point in life where I'm shaping how I believe about life and think about women, think about men, think about our sex. Pornography had a profound impact. And the material, if it was just women being unclothed, it would have been bad enough. But it actually, had women being, bound and gagged, and women being beaten, and I could go on and on and on. There's a lot of demeaning, very toxic, very destructive ideas. Had those ideas been played out in real life, we'd be arrested for it.
Right.
You would not be able to do that to a person and be able to stay out of jail. And yet they were putting that in a glamorized, sexualized, arousing framework that made it look like, especially as a kid, because they call it adult entertainment. They call it adult, this is how adult men treat adult women. This is what sex really is. So it was a very, very damaging education, for sure, on top of already what I was experienced in life, where someone had the right to cross my sexual boundaries for their own pleasure. And so at 12, I started consuming porn as much as I could get a hold of it. And I would go into stores and I'd steal it. I would go to friends' houses, and if their parents had it, or they had it somewhere, I'd find it. We would watch it. There was no such thing as video in those days. It was back in the day, in the wagon days. I'm 67 right now. So back in the day when, Hefner actually started Playboy, I was a young boy. And so I grew up in the sexual, quote unquote, revolution. And so porn was a big part of my growing up. And it's secret, though, because I was never allowed to consume that. My parents would have definitely hung me for doing something like that. It was totally anti everything I grew up learning. So I was a consumer. Yeah. And then at 16, I made a big step to say, no, I can see how this is affecting me. I can see that how this is affecting the relationships and my dating relationships, and that that this stuff doesn't work when you apply it to real life. You apply it to real life, and people get mad or walk away or call me names. And so I realized that porn needed to stop. So at 16, I stopped, and went for till I was about 21. I got married, had started having kids, and that first child, my wife was pregnant, and we got married when I was 21, and she got pregnant right after that, and so right at becoming 22, we have our first son. Well, in the 6 months pregnancy, 6 months of that pregnancy, she woke up in the middle of the night screaming and crying, just sweat all over her. She was in a fetal ball position, and I couldn't touch her, I couldn't hold her, I couldn't kiss her, I couldn't do it. She just completely pushed me away, and I thought, what the heck is going on here? And inside, I thought, oh my gosh, somehow she knows and sees that broken part of me that I don't like, that I hate. And so I was like, oh Lord, this is over. And this is done. I mean, I'd walk up to her, she's washing dishes, and come up behind her and give her a hug, and she'd push me away. I'd literally give her a kiss and she'd wipe it off. And I thought, man, this is over, it's done. And reality was that baby triggered her own sexual abuse that she had as a child. And she didn't even, our firstborn started moving in her tummy. And so this started a whole lot of problems, because she was pushing away, and she wasn't being affectionate, and she wasn't being loving. At the same time, I'm going, well, if she doesn't love me, then I'm going to get this somewhere else. And so that started the whole ball rolling for me to step into sex clubs and going to prostitution, going to massage parlors, and going to strip clubs. I could buy now. So I could go to the adult bookstores, and I could buy pornography. And so I still kept it all in secret. So no one had a clue that I was consuming. No one had a clue that I was doing this on the side. And first, it started out really kind of small, maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. And then as the marriage got worse, I used the porn and the clubs as a way to cope.
Can I ask a question? I mean, did you ever talk to her about what the issue was with her waking up and having these these nightmares? And
yeah, I mean, I tried to approach it, and she didn't talk. She just was freaked out over the memories. Now, it's the only reason why I knew about the memories being triggered was later in therapy, we were trying to figure out, how we can build our marriage. And, I brought to the table that she became non-sexual, absolutely had an aversion to sex, and in any way, shape, or form. And so we went to counseling for it. And in counseling, it came out in the open. But I had never, in counseling, I didn't tell anybody any of this stuff. I just kept my mouth shut and just put it all on her. I've said that my problem with her is her. That it really, the truth is that when we started looking at it, my view, because what porn, one of the things about what porn did is as an education. And when you learn something and you believe something is true, which is that women was primary need or responsibility was to meet my needs sexually, and that she would be depriving me of love and care if we were not having sex, and that sex is the number one thing that a wife's role was. And if she's not taking care of my needs, then I have a right to go outside of that. And that is, and how even in the terms of the activities, what I was expecting from her to do, things that I was seeing porn and she wasn't doing, which meant that I'm being deprived, thinking that, well, this is what adults do and you're not doing them. Therefore, and you're not wanting to do them. You're not even wanting to learn how to do them. You're totally adverse to doing this. And so I just decided, heck with you. I'm just going to do this myself and keep my mouth shut, not say anything. And I survived doing that behind closed doors, not knowing that I was getting worse and that this was growing and this was becoming a huge problem for me. And so every time we started having fights, I didn't even try to work through it anymore. I just stepped out the door and went and did it. And so I had a very successful business and had tons of money and lots of ability to use money wherever I wanted. And so at the height of this, I was probably spending, $300, $400, $500 a week, going. And so the idea in mind is that you can't, what I didn't realize then was that this escalates. An addiction, when you use mood altering substances or mood altering experiences to cope with pain, then for a season it works, and then it no longer works because it becomes norm, and so I need to upgrade it, and so that means more graphic, more disgusting, or boundaries that I said I would never cross to get the same high that I once had. And so this progressed and continued to grow, and the relationship was a mess. And the more I got involved with this, the worse it got. So I was very, I was very, I don't know, the word would be disgusted with myself, but at the same time, thinking that if I need to leave this relationship, and then if my wife would just do these things, our marriage would be fine, not realizing that the mess I was in is really because of the mess. I mean, she could have had, if I would have responded to her in a way that was loving and caring and understanding, that I could have given her space to heal and entered this with a full presence. But what I was doing was I was numbing out. So I wasn't even aware of what she was feeling internally. I didn't even care because she wasn't meeting my needs. So I wasn't present at all. Even though I was physically there, I wasn't present. And so it was my mess, really. And a good, loving man would have been to walk alongside his woman and give her the space to heal, to figure this out, rather than saying, if you don't perform, I'm out of here. And especially knowing that, as she began to open up in counseling, the trauma that she went through as a kid was unbelievable. And, I won't tell her story. That's her story to tell. But it was horrendous. And what she needed was a safe man to actually show something different than what I was showing. I just basically was her father on steroids. So it was terrible. So the idea that somehow if she changed, that everything would have been fine would have been crazy. No, I needed to change. Yeah, she needed to heal. There's no doubt. She had work to do, but it was really in my court to make some changes as well. So this escalated. And so I began to have fantasies of rape. And it's hard for me to even state that now as a man who's been 39 years in recovery. It bothered the heck out of me that I struggled with that and that I wanted that. And as some kind of healthy, normal sexual high. When I say that now, it sounds crazy, absolutely crazy, that I would see rape as a normal sexual high. But when I think about my experience, that all of my sexual experiences growing up were rape. And, and so I not to make any excuses, because there is no excuse but the reality of me, spending time fantasizing, a significant amount of time, with dreaming and thinking about raping someone as a way to get that sexual ultimate high. And with that was the fear that if the way I saw myself inside, the damage inside, is I could never have that woman because of, look at me, look at, I'm too broken. So if I can't have that and I want that, I'll take that.
Were there any issues with alcoholism, with alcohol or drugs or nothing like that?
No, I was never a drinker. Workaholism would probably be another aspect of it, because I poured myself into being successful at the cost of relationships. So workaholism, but not anything else. No alcohol, no, not smoking, not drugs, none of that. Yeah, it was mostly because when you view porn, or have a sexual encounter, there's a mood altering that takes place. And that mood altering, when you are depressed or you're lonely or you're feeling unloved or you're feeling bored or angry, just take this and you are immediately changed into euphoria. And so the drug it's like a drug, and you take that drug with you, because if I'm viewing porn, it's a mood altering to see those images. It immediately brings you to a different level emotionally when you're looking at them. And even if those images are not things that you would agree with, they are mood altering in a sense of shock, being disgusted even, so that there is mood altering in viewing.
Right. And then also kind of desensitizing.
Yeah.
Like you said, it becomes it's an evolution. It's a progression.
Right. Right. And then we're not even thinking about what the message is that it's communicating, like what are they doing to the woman, or what are they suggesting about that woman, or so we're not even thinking about below that. But the reality is those messages get planted with the emotional high. And so it was definitely an addiction, and it progressed. It didn't stop. It started out low key, just partial nudity and back in the day, and it just continued to escalate over time. And when you've seen everything there is to see then you would I started looking at bondage and things like that, and you just escalate and escalate, and you keep crossing lines. And for me, that was a huge line. And so when fantasy no longer satisfies, then you start thinking about what is real. What would it be like to do that? And so one night in the back of a club, well, it was a racquetball club, not a sex club. As I was getting out of the car, this woman walked by, walked into her own car, and man, something inside just snapped. It said, "This is your opportunity to fulfill that fantasy." There was nobody else in the parking lot. It was dark. And so I got out of my car and I followed her to her car. And I asked her a couple questions and broke the ice. And then as she put her racket in the car, she had her door open. She put her racket in the car. I forced my way into the car. And I had my hands around her throat with a full intent to rape. And she said to me, "Well, what are you going to do?" And she was pure fear. And when I saw, and this was life-saving for me and for her, is I saw pure fear in her eyes. It was like, I am the person who's her worst nightmare right now. I'm creating this fear. So it's like somebody slapped me across the face and said, "Hello, wake up. You're about to destroy another human being's life. What are you doing?" And this isn't fantasy anymore. This isn't some kind of thing you're doing off in the corner somewhere. This isn't just masturbating to an image anymore, or to a fantasy. This is a real human being. And the reality, and I know this is going to sound really crazy and probably most people will have a hard time, I don't know. But the reality, this is a person. This isn't a piece of meat. This isn't a commodity. She isn't a butt. She isn't a breast. She isn't something to use. She's a human being. And it came loud and clear through her eyes. And it's like it woke me up. And I just simply said, you know what? I made a serious mistake and I'm really sorry. And I let her go, got out of her car, excuse me. And I walked to my own car. And as I walked to my own car, she drove out, she got my license plates and she turned me in. And that was almost 40 years ago. And, that was the thing that woke me up though. I mean, there's no doubt that I caused a great deal of damage and there's no, no cute thing to say about that. It was, I know I scared the hell out of her. And there's no doubt in my mind that it caused a great deal of harm and fear in her world. And even though all I had done at this point was force my way into the car, that's the only damage done or thing that I did. But I know that it was definitely
traumatized.
Definitely. There's no question.
So she got, she gave the information to the police, gave a report, told them what happened. What did they do? They came to your house, just to question you, or were they ready to arrest you?
They arrested me. And the thing was that I admitted to it. I actually, when I did it, I drove home and I sat my wife down and I said, this is what's just happened. So I told her.
Oh, wow.
She was blown away because she had no idea of any of this. I mean, literally. She knew that something was wrong because we weren't talking or interacting. And we were just kind of existing. So it was really difficult to tell her, but I knew I needed to tell her because it wasn't no more than 45 minutes later, the police showed up at the door and they arrested me. And, I admitted it. And then I got an attorney and then we went through all of this and I'd never had a record or never been arrested for anything. A few driving tickets, but nothing of seriousness. And so we went through court and I had a 5-year prison thing that I was facing, and they ended up reducing that down to 90 days in jail with parole. So, but then they ended up dropping it down even further. And so, because it was first offense, and they had me go through a whole series of workshops and things. So, although I think that I got off a little easy, I would say, but I was committed to never return. In jail, the guys are all going, yeah, he says, you'll be back. People always do. And I said, no, I won't. This is my wake-up call. And then, they just teased me and they harassed me and all that. But that was it.
What were you charged with?
Ended up being a misdemeanor for assault. Not assault, for aggravated. What was it? No, I can't even remember. It was reduced. It was a felony, and then it was reduced to a misdemeanor. Because what I had done nothing sexual, and my hands around her throat, and I pushed my way into the car. So that's all they had to work with. I know what it was bad enough, and I know I deserve whatever they gave, but I went through it, and I decided that it was interesting because once I went through it, there was a ton of people that were saying, I struggle with a lot of the stuff that you not to the level that you did. I don't want rating, but man, I struggle with porn, or I've been going to the clubs, or I've been doing prostitution on the side, or there's just a ton of people that when it came out in the open, were going, what are you doing to get help? I need help. And so over the period of several years of me, committed to change and get help and determined to figure out what it takes to heal, because I don't want to ever go back to this. And I was very disappointed in how counseling was available, what kind of counseling was available. The only real help out there at the time is you go into a group and you say, hi, I'm a sex offender, and this is who I am for the rest of my life, and you will never be anything other than that, and everything is looked through as life through that lens. And I just didn't like that, because what they did was they pretty much guaranteed that that's what I will be for the rest of my life. It's stupidity. Yeah, I made some serious mistakes. Yes, I hurt other people. There's no question, but I can change, and that their life is not just that, and that there are many things about me and about that I care. I love people. I serve well. I'm a good professional. I'm a good dad. I'm a good husband.
Did you stay married?
No, she left. She decided. I mean, we stayed together for a season, but she just couldn't hang with what came out in the open. And I understand. It brought up her worst memories, her worst nightmares. And no matter what I did, actually, I was in the best shape period I could have been in my journey, but she couldn't hang. And I would, I look back on it, and I totally understand. I get it. I have no ill feelings towards her and her decisions, and that, I get it. And
right.
As getting into counseling, and you actually start looking at the severity of what you did, and how it impacted others, that's sobering. And I think this is where most people fail in the area of recovery is that we tend to look at what's happened to us, and we stay stuck there. Like, woe is me. I was a victim. I had sexual abuse in my story. Why don't you understand that? And we could certainly stay there, and quite frankly, need to work there. There's no doubt that I was wounded and that I need healing, and I need to work through that, and I need to change some of the thinking. But most of what I find in the offender side of things is they're still stuck in their victim side, not realizing that they're reacting out of that pain and hurting others, and they're blaming, they're not looking at or taking ownership to what they're doing. They're stuck in what happened to them and not looking at what they've done. And so it's not, and you can't focus just on what they've done either. You just say that person's an offender. Well, look at the story behind it. Look at the reality that that's a human being who there isn't a story that I haven't worked with, and what I mean is that I haven't heard who's been an offender, who has not been offended. And they go together. And hurt people. It's not an excuse, it's a reality. And so if I'm going to really help someone change their life, they got to look at where all this stuff started. And it doesn't give them an excuse, well, I was hurt, so I hurt somebody. No, that's not what we're saying. Because if we did that, then we'd give everybody a free ride. We realize that if we've been hurt, we better get some help. Don't hold on to it. Don't swallow it. Don't keep it under. If you're struggling, you don't keep it under, because as long as you keep it secret, it grows. It doesn't. Keeping things in dark causes it to grow. So coming out in the open in a safe place, if I would have had a place where I could have talked about this, I don't know if I carrying so much shame, I don't know if I could have talked. The way this came out in the open was a forced deal. And, but thank God, I look back at it now, I'm glad it did. I'm not glad it happened to her. So there's no glamour in that. But the reality that it came out for me was my first step for help. And if I didn't have it out in the open, I don't know if I could have talked about it. I don't know if I could have ever said, hey, I struggle with, rape fantasy, or, hey, I'm going to prostitutes. you're married and you have kids. Really? Are you serious? You weirdo. There's such a perception of when there's sexual dysfunction involved, that people are perverts or weirdos or free labels that make it impossible for a person who struggles to ever talk. And the first step is to talk. You can't heal what you hide.
Right. Yeah, I definitely believe that, you know. So after you got out of the jail stint, your wife, you know, she hung out for a little bit, but it just didn't work out. And what did you do? Was this something that immediately happened, or did you I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, did you continue, you know, this, I mean, was that the wake up call and everything, you know, all better at that point, or was it a progression?
You know, I made a decision when I was arrested that I was going to change. I had no idea what that meant, though. I thought I was just going to be, okay, I'm turning around right here. This is it, done. So in jail, you know, while I was there, I made a commitment to shift and change. And when I walk out, I'm going to be a different person.
Right. But like you said, there's really nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go. But I think when I got out of jail and I came back to the reality of a mess relationship that didn't go away, in fact, it just got 20 times worse. So the pain of that relationship and learning that's how I learned to cope, was to go to sex, pornography. So I struggled for a while, not anywhere close to the same level that I did before. The rape fantasy crap is gone and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is that I still went to clubs, still went to massage parlors as a way to compensate for what I wasn't getting in the real world. And it took a while for me to work out what I was doing and what is dysfunctional and what is not, because it was really confusing. I mean, I didn't really know. I knew that what I did wasn't right, and I knew that it needed to change because it clearly hurt somebody else, but I had no idea. So it took me, I'd say, several years of being in recovery, doing groups, seeing a counselor, reading books, going to retreats, doing intensives, just a whole lot of different things to help me begin to understand how to change. The thing was that most recovery stuff, back in the day especially, was behavioral. So it's like, you just don't do that anymore, and here's what you do to change that. And so it was all behavioral. So we just change everything on the outside. But the truth is everything that you see behavior-wise is a fruit, is a symptom of something deeper. And if I'm really going to help someone change, I got to look at how did that get started? Where did that begin? So we look at beginning places. We look at where things start. And if you deal with roots, then the fruit is no longer existent. But if you play games with the fruit, in other words, games meaning I stop this, don't go there, don't run with these people, don't buy that, don't use this, then that's like cutting off the branch. And when you cut off a branch, all you've done is prune it. And pruning is never meant to get rid of anything. Pruning is a strategy to have more fruit. So when you cut off a branch, the very life that brought that branch about still exists. So the root system, then the life that was bringing that branch about, goes back into the roots, builds a bigger root system, and then comes back with more life, comes back with more fruit. So what it means is that no matter how many times I said no, that I'll never do this again, it always came back, and it came back stronger. It kind of came back even worse. So the idea that I can change the behavior without changing what's going on the inside is not happening. And so any kind of treatment program that focuses in on just the fruit, in other words, an offender program, you're just going after the behavior. You're not dealing with what's really going on. Yeah, you're looking at behavior mod. So behavior modification only lasts for a temporary basis. That's why we see people reoffend and reoffend and reoffend. And people have a really difficult time not saying, there's a statement that once an offender, always an offender. So don't give the somebody who's offended any breaks. I mean, it's just one step away from offending. And I would agree with that if all you do is do behavioral mod. But if you actually deal with what is really going on, which we do, when the works that I do, we see people completely change and shift and move if they want to. Because some people, and this is just reality, some people will jump through the hoops, but inside, they don't want to change. They want to stay with, they want everybody to leave them alone. They want to still do what they want to do, and there's no getting them to change. And so, yeah, they'll jump through the right hoops to get the law off their back, and then they reoffend, and they reoffend, and they reoffend. And those people should never see the light of day work-wise. They should be in prison. So they reoffend, and they reoffend. They need to be there. They show and demonstrate that they can't live in society and not hurt people. But especially in child molestation and a child offender, we've had those as well, is that they actually see themselves as loving that child, that they are actually nurturing that child. That's a true molester, pedophile, is someone who believes that they are loving that child. And what we find is the roots to that is that whatever age they were sexually abused or damaged, doesn't have to be sexual abuse, but whatever age that they were wounded, they're emotionally arrested and they stop growing emotionally in that area. So they still see themselves and parts of themselves as that age. So if they were molested or they were hurt, at 8 years old, then they're going to like kids around 8, 9, 10, 7, 6. So they find kids attractive based on the age that they stop growing. And so if they don't address that and they don't face that and they actually don't grow up and take adult things and heal, then they will always want children at that age, because that's how so they don't see any advances that they make towards children.
Right. I was going to say, I was, I don't know if you know this, I was incarcerated. But I was at the federal prison complex in Coleman, Florida, and I was at the medium security prison, but I was also at the low for a time. And at the low, there's nearly half the compound has some kind of a sex crime, and although I'd say 90% of them are lying about it.
Right.
They'll tell you they're there for something else, but it just becomes it's so obvious, and there's such a large group of them that they don't really have to hide it. But I definitely, after speaking with numerous offenders, and everything you're saying is like spot on, and in some cases they would, like you said, they would actually want to mount an argument that they actually, love this child, or giving them affection and that sort of thing. And like you said, all of them had been abused as children. Yep. Like I don't think I ever spoke with anybody that hadn't been abused, even if they didn't consider it abuse. Yeah. Like they were 11 or 12 and there was a cousin or a brother or sister that was touching them inappropriately, even if they were like, that happens to everybody. And I was like, well, no, it doesn't, and obviously, even if it happens to a lot of people, it had a dramatic effect on them, because they suddenly were attracted to 11 or 12-year-old, girls or boys or whatever it may be. I used to always say, in a very real way, you have to, you have to feel bad for them, because they were victims before they became predators. And I used to say, the problem is that, once they became predators, like as sad as it is, what put them in that situation, you just can't let monsters roam the countryside. I mean, and it's just such a shitty situation.
It is. And I think you don't do this with the idea in mind, well, we just got to let them, they were molested as a child, or they were harmed as a child. So therefore we have to have some kind of, mercy on the consequences. Mercy on the consequences would actually allow them, like a child, if a child doesn't,
Yeah, it would just keep going.
If a child disobeys and does something wrong, you don't let the child go without consequences.
Right.
Consequences are important.
So then they're creating monsters.
Exactly. So consequences are vital to someone's health. And if the consequence is that they spend the rest of their life in jail based on what they did, then they spend the rest of their life in jail. But can the person change? Absolutely. It does. The consequences, you can't pull consequences in the name of helping someone. You don't help people by enabling them for the messes they've created. And so I would say that, I've had several individuals who had a prior history of molestation, being molested, but also molesting. And they went and spent time in jail. They've done their time. And in there, they only did their time, but they did their work. And then they come out and they do the work anyhow, even though it's not required. They went beyond the requirements. Why? Because they want to heal. They want to change. They want to be different. That person is going to come and enter society differently. And so the idea that someone who jumps through the hoops as long as they have to, and then goes and lives a different life completely once they get out, and that different life is back in the same way that they got them arrested, then they're just a walking time bomb.
I was going to say, what's funny is that although sex offenders, have a high recidivism rate, they have but for the actual crime, it's much lower. So the actual recidivism rate for reoffending on a sexual crime is much lower than, let's say, a drug dealer gets out, he's going to sell drugs again. Well, not going to, but whatever the recidivism rate, it's almost 5% that he's going to sell drugs. They very seldomly, reoffend for a sex offense. Not that they don't, but they very seldom. Most of the time when these guys reoffend, it's because of another crime. Like what's happened, I think, is that you've taken them and put them into a position where now they can't make a living. They can't live anywhere. They get desperate. So they don't register, or they steal. They have to steal to survive, or they break into someone's house, or they start doing other things to survive, and then they end up back in prison. Well, yeah, you did reoffend, but it wasn't for looking at child, pornography or whatever it may be. So, that wasn't what typically. I'm not saying. I think it's low. It's like 3 or 4% reoffend for the actual original offense. Typically it's something else.
But the thing is, it's interesting, is that when we label someone, in other words, offenders, let's just go with that. Once an offender, always offender. And then you have a court system that when they get out, that they literally will never get past that label, that they will literally have to live that label out. Now, I get it. I understand the idea that the society needs to be safe, and I don't have any qualms with that. But when we say that is who they are for the rest of their life, and that they never have a chance to ever change, then we set them up big time for failure.
Right.
Do. And so we forget, and this is really, really big, is that when we label people, they are no longer human. They're this label. So we strip humanity away from an individual with a label. And
it's just a horrible situation all the way around. Like the problem is, I just don't there's just no good answer. Right. There's just no good solution. It's, you've got guys on one side of the fence and just, execute them. You've got guys on the other side of the fence, who are maybe like, oh, they did their time, they should go. Well, no, I mean, that's not really the answer is probably somewhere in between. And it's just, there's just no perfect solution. And the problem is that every sentence doesn't fit everybody. It has to be tailor made.
Yeah. It's totally different. Totally.
It's a tough situation.
It is. That's where, the thing is though, if we, where I what makes my work different than most. I'm not the only one out there doing this, obviously, but what makes mine different is that we look at the roots. And I'll hear a lot of people say, well, we deal with root issues as well. But actually knowing what the root is and understanding what the root is really key. So the number one source of any of this is shame. And if we don't look at shame and we don't understand what shame is, and we don't address it and we don't give them the tools to address it, then shame will ultimately win back, and they'll be back in behaviors to cover that shame. And so shame is at the center of all addiction, at the center of all dysfunction, truthfully. And so what shame is it's a belief that I'm flawed at the core, that there's something really wrong with me and I've got to cover it. I can't let me be seen. And why is that so important? Because the number one need in life is to be known and to be loved. So it's the word intimacy. So intimacy is not sex. Intimacy is relational, that you see me for who I am and you know me and you love me. That's the number one need across the board, whether that's male or female. It doesn't matter. And what we have done is, especially porn culture, has said that women's need is intimacy and men's need is sex. And so the idea that if we go into a relationship and we get married, or we're in a committed relationship and we decide we're going to walk this out with someone, is that the man has a right, because he's saying that he's being exclusive. In other words, not looking anywhere else. He's going to pour himself into that one relationship. And if she's not giving him sex, then he has a right, because it's a need. It's not like it's, they're perceiving it as just like you drinking water, getting air, eating food, getting rest. They're putting it in that same framework. So if you don't get sex, you have a right to go outside and look for it somewhere else. The idea that she owes you sex, that whole thinking is really toxic and destructive, because now we're not seeing women as women. We're seeing women as our sex. Like, it's no different than having masturbation, only I found somebody to give it to. So that masturbating through a woman's body, rather than seeing her as an individual, as a person. So intimacy is the need, and that both men and women carry it. But when I just need to be known and to be loved, that is like breathing air. I need that. And I have shame, which says to be known is the death of you. So shame then cuts off what I need. So if I don't get my real needs met, which is intimacy, which is to be known, to have close connection with others, then I reach out to then use things to meet that need. And for porn and sex and all that, I'm using people to get that need met. And so I reduce something to an object. I use something that won't reject me, that won't hurt me, that won't walk away, that I can use to get that quote unquote need met. So some people choose drugs, some people do alcohol, some people do food, some, gambling, we could go on and on and on. But they use something. It's not connect with something, they use something. And so when we objectify women, which is what porn does, and we see women through the lens of their body rather than as a human being, as their soul, how they think, what they feel. When we objectify, then we're using women, not connecting. And so shame plays a significant role in causing all of this to happen, because if I have a connected life, in other words, people know me and they actually see my mistakes and they see my flaws and they walk alongside me and they support me as I get help, and they're to help support me in any way they can, that they love me and accept me and know me, man, that brings my heart alive. That brings, there's connection, there's life there, there's something to celebrate. Wow. And having that celebration of connection is what changes life. And so if I'm going to help people heal and change, it won't be just to stop the behavior. It will be, here's how we really get what we want.
Obviously that shame is what stops them from getting to that point.
Yep.
Yep. Like they're not going to reach, people don't want to reach out because they're embarrassed, and they,
yep.
it's, Yeah, it's, you know, this is just a shitty situation.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
just all the way around. Like, who want, and it just like with, in your case, had you reached out earlier, had you not been trying to hide this and
Right,
felt like, hey, there's a place I can go, there's somebody I can talk to, I don't have
right,
to be embarrassed about this,
right.
I need to deal with this, then you wouldn't have gotten to that point.
Exactly. It would have arrested it. It would have stopped it. And it would have broken that path. Um,
Like alcoholics, a lot of times, I mean, not everybody has to hit rock bottom. Obviously, some people realize they have a problem and
right.
they just, I want to cut it out. But I'd say a significant portion of addicts in general have to hit kind of a rock bottom to say, hey, I can't live like this, you know? So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. And so shame is a belief. It's not just a feeling, it's a belief. And the belief is that I'm too broken to be loved. And where did that start? It started at 6 years old for me. The shame, I internalized what happened to me as who I was. And so I didn't want anybody to see that. Now, what I needed in that moment, if we bring this to an understanding of how it can change as well, is that at 6 years old, what did I need? If I would have told my parents would have, they would have cried with me. They would have went and confronted the offender. They would have done what they needed to do for me to get help. My parents would have not in any way, shape, or form said, "Oh, wow, you're too dirty to be loved. We're throwing you on the side." So it's not what they would actually do, but it's what I perceive them to do. It's how I perceive myself. So I go into hiding. But what I needed to be at that moment is that little 6-year-old boy needed to be known. That little 6-year-old boy needed to let people know that he was hurting. Someone just took his innocence. And he's confused and he doesn't know how to perceive himself. And that's where the lies began. The lies start in those experiences early in childhood, and they grow. And then when they grow, they grow based upon how I use things. And I don't want people to know that I'm doing this to cope. And so I keep hiding and I keep hiding and I keep hiding and I keep hiding. And really what I need is someone to know and help and support, someone to care about me anyhow. And so shame sabotages our need for intimacy. And that is the number one need. And if we could help people actually learn how to live a connected life. How do you open up? How do you set boundaries? How do you have conflict? How do you risk your heart? How do you trust? How do you be vulnerable? Because when I was sexually abused, being vulnerable was like, that's crazy, because when I was vulnerable, people took advantage of my innocence. No, I'm never going to be vulnerable again. I'll take control. I'll always be in power. I'll always be, and how do you do that? We can't do that in a relationship. You can only do that when you objectify someone. You make them an underling. You make them somebody you can control. So I'm in power.
So where did this lead you? Did you work with a group or?
Yeah, what it did was the change happened, and it started at a very simple event, and then it just kind of grew. And that event was that when I was arrested and I spent time in jail, I literally lost all relationships. There was a few people that stayed there, but for the most part, everybody I thought was a friend was gone. And quite frankly, I don't want to play the victim here and say, well, woe is me in that. The reality is I lied to people. I broke trust with people. I mean, it just, the lifestyle I was living behind the scenes, I get it. I understand that it was tough for people, because the person that they knew me to be was not the person. And so it was deception, it was betrayal of trust. So I get why they walked away. So I don't want to say that I'm some kind of victim in that. But the reality of it is that I couldn't be real and be open, and for fear of how they would handle me. And they lived out my greatest fear. And so I just got worse. For the first part, I was closed off. I pulled away. I was still going to the clubs, And this guy who I had known for a long time since I was a kid, he was a pastor of a very large church in California, and he used to come and do some of the retreats that I would go to in the summertime. And in a long story short, he called me one day and he said, "Hey, I haven't heard from you in a long time. Why don't we get together?" And he lived about 3 hours away. And I said, "No, I got so much going on. I don't really have time." He just wouldn't take no for an answer. And he had no idea that I had been arrested. He had no idea that I got through any of this. And so finally he talked me into it. So I said, "Okay, I'll come down." And so I 3-hour drive. I'm thinking, okay, I'll talk about the weather. I'll talk about sports. I'll talk about the Dodgers. I'm not talking about anything serious. I'm just not going to have any real conversation. And so I come into the office and I sit down and I have my speech, so to speak. And so I started talking, I talked about the weather and how it's, it's nice and hot, just a bunch of things. And then, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes went by. And then he said, "So how are you really doing?" And I normally, for whatever reason, to this day, I don't know what the heck happened, except for that I decided to just let it out. And so I just literally poured, not just a little bit. I just vomited. Vomited all of this stuff, everything all the stuff I'd never told anybody. I just put it all out there. I'd say I was there 2 to 3 hours. I don't know. I have no idea. I lost time. I wept. I had snot running out of my nose. I was a mess, literally. And I got it all out. And he gets up from behind his desk now. He's between me and the doorway. I'm over in the corner. I got nowhere to go. And so he's walking towards me, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to throw me and throw my ass out of here. And so I stand up and my fists are clenched and I'm ready to deck him, because if one more person that does what the others people have done, I'm taking him out. I've had it. And he comes up and he just puts this wrestler's hug on me. And literally just gives me this strong hug. And he buried his head in the side of my neck, and he just began to weep. He just, literally, tears were flowing. And I'm thinking, what the heck? And he just said, "I'm so sorry that you've never had anybody ever really love you or accept you for I'm sorry that all those things happened to you, and I'm here to walk this out with you." Now, to be honest, I'm now 29, 30, I'm 30 years old, somewhere in there. And here's, for the first time in my life, I'm tasting, as we just described, intimacy. Intimacy has nothing to do with sex. It has zero to do with sex. Intimacy has to do with connection. And here's this man who has heard my worst, literally my worst, and he's embracing me. And no sex, no garbage, just embracing. And it profoundly shifted my heart. Profoundly. Now, I had a lot of learning to do about what he just gave me, because I thought, what the heck? He did, whatever he was given, I want more of that. I don't know what it was, what he just did. There's no magic wand there. What did he just do? Because it turned my heart around inside. What it did was it gave my heart life. It gave my heart the will to change, the will to do something. And so I jumped, over a journey of getting us small groups and started sharing, and I got a counselor, and I really started digging in. And over a period of time, I realized now that what he gave was the first taste of what intimacy is. And so it was his interaction with me that started the ball really rolling for recovery and change. And so, I built a life where I have not just one, but I have a ton of people who know me inside and out. There's nothing hidden. And they will walk alongside me. They support me and they love me. I do the same with them. And so when you have a heart that's full, and I mean full, meaning not how much money I got, not how many titles I got next to my name, not how much toys I've collected over life, but when I actually have a heart full of what? Connection. I was created for relationship. I was meant for relationship. And I'm not a human being. I'm not a human doing. I'm a human being. And so no doing compensates for the lack of being, which is connection. And so when I tasted that, when I got that was a change for me. That was a move for me. Now, it didn't change everything, obviously. I had a lot of work to do, but it gave me the energy. And that's really key here, because I've put tools in front of people. I've given people plenty of chances to change, and all you can imagine, and them not having the energy to pick those tools up and do it is huge, because people still think or carry shame inside that somehow they're too broken, they'll never change, they can't get past this. You don't understand. Look at the mess that I see. And so by having intimacy where we really know it, we actually give people the energy to actually change. And they put that energy towards learning and growing and healing. And so I believe with all my heart, based on, 30 plus years now of helping people, is that we help them learn how to connect, which means intimacy. It means how do you open up the real stuff and build relationships around you, and where life happens in your interactions. You won't go back. Why would you settle for hot dogs when you could have steak and lobster? You won't go back. You just won't. Doesn't mean you won't be challenged, but why would I give up what I've got when I've wanted all my life? Then a lot of us don't even know how to put words to that, right? We don't know what we want, but we know there's something better, that there's something out there more than what we're experiencing. And the reality of it is, it's the shame that we carry keeps us from connection. So we break the shame by being open. We break the shame by allowing people to see us. And then we learn to change those belief systems that says we're shit, that we're no good, that we don't matter. And we turn those around. We begin to change it by the relationships we're in, the people that communicate, I am worth it, that I do matter, that I am important, that I am special, that I have uniqueness, and it's to be celebrated. So it changes everything. So the game changer is breaking shame, giving people the tools to build a healthier relationships in their life. And it doesn't mean you have to have 30 relationships. Just have one life-giving relationship. That you don't need to be an extrovert to do this, but you need at least one person who knows you with no protection, with no hiddenness, no secrets. Because that's where real connection happens. When someone knows me and knows my flaws, knows my fears, my weaknesses, and they know my strengths, my gifts, my calling, if you will, and they know what I'm passionate about, and they love me, man, that's a light to celebrate. It gets excited. So when two people know each other like that, then that celebration of, wow, we have connection. Sex is the result. Healthy sexuality is when it's a result of, it's a fruit of that connection. Sex doesn't create connection. Sex is a fruit of connection. And so the why people go to sex is because sex is, there's no hiddenness. You see the body, you see fully, and there's nothing hidden. Sex has the illusion of intimacy. But the truth is, you can have sex with someone, no clothes, everything's nothing hidden, and you still walk away not knowing each other. I did that for years. Doesn't matter. So no matter how many times you have sex with someone and you see their body, they see you, you don't know each other. They don't know your history. You don't know them. So intimacy is not sex, but they can come together only when, in a healthy way, they come together when you have the connection first, that intimacy, and then sex becomes the outflow. But pornography just simply says, no, you can do it this way and that way. And if you're struggling sexually, you just add spice to it. You just add another partner. You just get new toys, or you do this, you do new positions. And reality is, none of that actually brings long-term satisfaction. It's actually what brings satisfaction is you work on your connection, your sexual relationship changes. So people who are struggling sexually in their relationship, it's not about finding out, more information about what positions and all that, although I'm not against any of that. It's that you really lack what to celebrate. I mean, you don't have nothing to celebrate. So the lack of things to celebrate is the lack of sexual connection. And yeah, you can have orgasm. Yeah, you can have all that and still feel like you aren't really going anywhere. And why is that? Because the lack of connection. So you build connection and the sex becomes a natural outflow from that. And that's missing. It's missing in all of the culture. We keep thinking that sex is what makes us all connect. And that's putting the cart before the horse. So I say that to say, if we're going to help people heal, it won't be that we help them with the sexual part first. It will certainly be there. But the bigger piece is addressing the shame and giving people the tools on how to live a connected life.
Okay.
That was a mouthful. Sorry.
That's fine. feel like you feel like you've said that before. Feel like you've got it down.
Yeah. It makes all the difference in the world, bro. It just does. And it's made a difference in my world. I mean, I've been out, almost 40 years. I'm not gone back. I've never been arrested again. I've never been in that world again. I'm done. And I never will. There is so much to life. There's so much to offer. My life is different. But, I still have to face consequences of those choices back in the day. I still have some of my kids still are wounded from that I'm still having to work through. I lost a marriage of 27 years with that first marriage. And, there's a lot of damage done. But now when I look though, as I've restored my relationships and I've worked through the pain of it all, I have an amazing woman in my life, and we know each other. We walk alongside, we celebrate, we're true partners. And oh yeah, we still have messes, but we know it and we work on it. And I'm on top of the world relationally. And I feel like, life is what it should be, and I'm 67. I wish I would have known this when I was younger. But it's taken a lifetime to figure it out. But we do that. We bring people in, we do groups, and we do these retreats where we call it Pursuing the Hidden Heart, for men, we do it called Authentic Manhood. And we deal with what is the masculinity aspect, and we look at what it takes to heal the broken areas of our life. We look at sexuality, we look at pornography, and talk about all that stuff. Talk about being a father and a husband, and just living in the world as a man. And what does it mean to be healthy? So we do these retreats and workshops, and people come out going, "Wow, this has put me on a whole different trajectory." And they don't walk away going, "I'm changed, I'll never be the same." They walk away with, "Wow, this profoundly helps me see where I need to go and what I need to do. And I tasted something I've never tasted before, and I want to learn more." And so this is a journey. Nobody gets a magic wand. Nobody gets a quick fix. But we can turn things around and make things different. And if they do the work, absolutely change possible. I'm a living example that as many others that I've worked with. That your behaviors, let me just say it this way. Your mistakes that you've made, the things that you've done wrong, do not have to be the definer for how you live your life out now.
Right.
You can turn your life around, and you can change it if you want to.
I hear you. I did 13 years in prison.
Yeah.
I got out like 4 years ago,
Well, good for you. I'm really proud of you, because it takes a lot of strength to do what you just did. Really? It really does. And not let people, pigeonhole you in. and look what you're building, look what's happening in your life.
I feel like they have pigeonholed me though. I run a true crime channel.
Oh, brother.
All I talk about is crime. I really did, but I did it to myself. So
but I mean, who says this is where you end up, right?
Yeah. I love what I do. I mean, I talk to, I felt, very free in prison, because, I wasn't lying to anybody. I wasn't running some kind of a scam or a fraud. I wasn't concerned about, being arrested, and I didn't have to pretend to be, pretend to be like an honest businessman when really I was committing fraud, and, sit around with my friends who were all normal people, decent citizens. And, I didn't have to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. I could be a wolf among wolves, and I felt good being that open. And so I've just carried that on out here and turned it into a way to make money, make a living, just, having people tell their stories, because these guys have amazing stories. And, sometimes they're amazing stories of recovery and triumph and redemption, and sometimes there's just, horrific stories that maybe they don't have a great ending. They're still in the middle of their journey, right. But they have stories. They have interesting stories. And I have yet to meet anybody who's gone to prison. It doesn't have an interesting story. They might not have a 6-hour story. It might be 45 minutes, but they've done something that was unique and interesting, maybe horrific, maybe ingenious, but they've got a story to tell. And I like it when they come to me and I talk to them and they can tell it honestly, because I mean, I'm not in a position to judge anybody.
Right.
So it's a good living. It's a good way to make a living.
Well, the thing is that you can take what has happened to you, the mistakes you've made and things that have happened, and you can have a redemptive story, a redemptive framework. In other words, what could have been a defining moment, which would have been for the rest of your life, or you've chosen to use it as a stepping stone, a place where you can choose to have impact on lives and make a difference. The stories make a difference. People's stories are so important. Without the stories, then all we have is objectification. All we have is labels.
Right.
And by having stories, we get what's behind the eyes, what's real. And stories will always be the most important part of anything. So what you're doing is providing a real platform for people to take a good look at their own lives and learn, or the loved ones that they're in relationship with. You put humanity to the issue. That's good. Good.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. Do you have anything else you feel like we haven't covered, or?
No, I think what I think in wrapping things up is the idea that, objectification is really a reflection of my inability to connect. And so a fear of women, are afraid a fear of being intimate, is such a big deal. And if we really want to see change happen for all of our lives, is learning to connect with people rather than objectify, rather to try to control, and that whole idea that control meaning that I don't want people to know me. I control to keep people at a distance so they don't get too close to expose my stuff. And if you're living authentically, in other words, I'm living in the open with at least one person. I don't have to do that with every human being, but you let certain people in and other people you don't, because they're toxic and they're destructive and you don't want any harm done to you anymore. But learning how to pick those safe people and healthy relationships and be connected, so that I can learn how to not use people but connect with people. And that is a commitment that I've made is that I always choose to walk a life of connection. And you go in the gym, and sometimes women are almost wearing nothing, and you can choose to objectify and look at that and fantasize and all that, or you can choose to move past that and see that there's a human being standing there and let go of the whole objectification thing and pursue the person. It happens in everyday life. Everything that we do is either based on using or connecting. And be a person who pursues connection. Be a person who chooses to love people, care about people rather than use people. And that's been my journey. Now, this is it. How do I use the remaining part of my life to connect, to heal, to empower, to help people change? Yeah. So Thank you for the time I've had, and which was good. I enjoyed it.
Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, if you like the video, share it. Share it to somebody that will find this interesting and somebody that maybe you think needs it. Also, if you liked it, hit the subscribe button. If you haven't already, hit the bell so you get notified of videos like this, and leave me a comment. We'll leave any links that Gene has in the description box, so you can get in touch with him if you need to, or get in touch with the programs that he supports. And I really appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much. See ya.